To start, that's probably hard to see, but I kind of wanted you to get a picture for the fact that the Church of the Brethren is all over the place. Rwanda is just one of many countries where the Church of the Brethren is located. And Bob has said several times that my family was a part of planting the church. That's not quite accurate, so I do want to make the distinction that the church had already been in existence there for about 5 years prior to us going. But these are all the different countries in the world where the Church of the Brethren is located. The Church of the Brethren in Rwanda came about basically because there was a Rwandan pastor who had been with the Friends Church, or you might know them as the Quakers. He got into a master's program at Earlham College, and if you know that name, it's because our own Bethany Seminary shares a campus with Earlham College in Indiana. This pastor's name was Etienne Nzanzimana, and I will show you a picture of him in a little bit. A lot of the Rwandan names have that Imana in it, Habimana, Nzanzimana. The word Imana in their language is God. So a lot of people's names are like gift from God, blessing from God, praise be to God, things like that. Anyway, Etienne Nzanzimana felt a calling to meet the needs of the indigenous people in his home country of Rwanda. Those indigenous folks are known as the Batwa. And the Friends Church in Rwanda, not the Friends Church here in the United States, the Friends Church in Rwanda said, no, you can't do that. These people don't have any money, they won't be able to support your churches, so we don't want you to do that. Etienne he felt his calling very fervently, and so he continued to talk about it while he was at school in Earlham. And while in school, he came across a lot of Church of the Brethren folks and told this story to them. And within not too long, he was put in touch with Jay Whitmire, who at the time was in charge of global mission for the Church of the Brethren. One thing leads to another. Etienne goes back home to Rwanda, starts planting Church of the Brethren congregations in the western part of the country. And one of the distinctives of our churches in Rwanda is that they do meet the needs of the Batwa, who are the indigenous people of that country. I talked a little bit about the backstory of the history of the country of Rwanda, and what has happened over the last several years, just prior to the Church of the Brethren being there, is that a lot of this reconciliation work that I was referring to has been led by the historic peace churches. So the Mennonites are there doing great work. The Quakers are there doing great work, and now the Church of the Brethren is there as well. Rwanda is located in the continent of Africa. You probably can't really see it. Let's see, where are we? So if you can see this big country here, it's one of the bigger ones in Africa, and that's DR Congo, or we call it DRC, right there. Rwanda is this tiny little thing there. This one, I can't quite do it. Hold on, let me get closer. I'm like shaky from that far away. So this one is Uganda. This is Tanzania. This little one is Rwanda, and the little one below it is Burundi. So this little country of Rwanda is what we're talking about today. The population is about 12 million. So that little country, which is as big as like Maryland, okay, has 12 million people in it. Now, when I show you pictures of Rwanda, it does not seem like there are people on top of each other. And yet, it is one of the higher population densities in the world. You'll see the median age there is almost 20 years old. It's a very young population. That's because about 1 million people of the older generation were murdered 25 years ago. A lot of those that survived scattered to some of the nations surrounding it. So that's some of the reason why it is such a young country. We were told before going that, they speak English. It'll be great. Well, they do. All of the government things are in English. And if you talk to somebody in country, that's all about being the language of business, is what they say. So to be in contact and relevant with the Western world, they do have English as their language. Previously, before the genocide, it was a French-speaking nation, though not many people speak French either. One of the big shifts that has happened over 25 years is saying we're no longer French-speaking, now we're English-speaking. So if you talk to somebody who is 20 or younger, all of them know a little bit of English and no French. If you talk to somebody that's 20, 25 and older, they know very little English, but they know a little bit of French. So it's a really interesting hard shift that has happened over the course of 25 years. There at the top is the official language is Kinyarwanda is the language everybody speaks. It's just the language of the people, and it's a very, very, very hard language to learn. My wife speaks French fluently. She grew up in Quebec, and so she has a knack for language, and it's virtually impossible. They put a sentence is one long, 50-letter word that they just keep adding things to it. And it's easy to read the word, but you don't know what you're saying. You can pronounce it very well as well. They use our letters. But to know exactly what it is saying is very difficult. It's rated in the top 5 hardest languages to learn in the world. So we did our best as far as that goes. The currency is the franc. It's about, right now, I think it's around 900 francs to $1. And you can see the average yearly income of around $500. A lot of things are very cheap there, so you can get by on less money than you can here, for sure. But even so, $500 a year is not much. So what we were sent to do, as I said, the Church of the Brethren was already there. We were not sent there to plant congregations. I'm not a church planter. I've been in intercultural ministry in Harrisburg since 2003. Part of what I've been gifted in is to be able to roll in someplace and build relationships with people. God's blessed me with that ability, and my wife is very much a driven kind of leader, sort of spiritual gifting, and so we make a pretty good tandem. So our mission was simple. Jay Whitmire said, hey, we want to send you guys to Africa, to Rwanda. There's a lot of awesome things happening. We just want you to be there, meet people. If questions come up about, what's this brethren thing all about, answer them. Try to live as brethren among the Rwandan brothers and sisters. And, just do what they ask you to do, essentially. But also, the big thing is to build this bridge from Rwanda back home. Tell the story of what's going on in the Great Lakes region of Africa back home. I don't know if you can see it on the picture there, but that's a canopy walk. It's literally a bridge at the top of the trees in the rainforest of Rwanda. Now, so that's just to illustrate the bridge that we're trying to build from there to here. Being a bridge builder, going into a different culture can be very scary. And this is a picture of my daughter freaking out while we walked across the thing. We had a really good time doing that. And it was way more secure than what it may look like, but she was terrified. This work can be a little bit scary, but we really were super blessed to be a part of all that is going on there and all that continues to go on. One of the big things was getting to know the church, getting to know what's God already doing here. Spent a lot of time just exploring the country, learning about the people. The woman pictured there is Mama Irwa, and she was a big part of our family while we were there, helping us to navigate different cultural norms and stuff. The culture itself is a little bit passive. To ask a direct question of somebody, which is very normal for us, it's seen almost as rude. So if I need $50, I don't go and say, Bob, can I have $50? I talk to Bob's friend, who then talks to his friend, who then talks to Bob about how Josiah needs $50. And then Bob tells that friend, it's all circuitous. So there's certain things like that we had to navigate and to learn. And we talked to Mama Irwa right at the beginning and said, listen, we really need somebody that we can just directly ask questions, and she was happy to kind of help us. And the baby there is Beligne. That's my daughter Rachel. It was Rachel's baby, basically. Every time Beligne was around, they were together. And that's my son Asher pictured as well. We visited all the congregations. There were 4, and there remain 4, though there are a couple other fellowships that are beginning to meet in other parts of the country. Sometimes that meant, hiking through a potato field like you see there. We also did some site visits, visiting different villages. This is the primary Batwa village that our churches are working with. I think there's 2 other villages of Batwa that we're working with. The Global Food Initiative of the Church of the Brethren has done some work with them, and you'll see right there in the front is Pastor Chris Elliott. He's from Southern PA District. He's about to go back to Rwanda in January to do some more work with the Twa. We were able to visit the homes of church leaders. Right at the beginning, we had a really hard time trying to figure out how to connect, and Pastor Etienne had a wonderful idea. Why don't I set up visits? You can go to the believers' homes, see how they're living, and you'd be amazed. Like, even though we couldn't speak very well together, even though we couldn't communicate using words, there's so much that can be communicated just by dwelling in the same space. There were often times that we're just sitting there in a room, just being together, not much words being exchanged at all, and you can still, so much work is being done in building relationship, even not using words. Now, a lot of that, is different than what we're used to, and a lot of that could get kind of long and kind of annoying. And Christine always laughs at that picture. I don't even know what I was thinking there, but sometimes just sitting in silence can be quite difficult and can take a long time and really take the energy out of you. We were invited to be a part of a lot of important ceremonies and social gatherings. This is what is called a civil union. If you were to get married in Rwanda, you will get married at your church, probably, but you also get married in the eyes of the state. And so you see them touching the flag of Rwanda and swearing to be by one another's side. Something that is, I think, very cool about Rwanda is it's a little bit more equal. There's more equality for women in Rwanda than a lot of other African countries. So this woman being married to this man in the eyes of the state, if something were to happen and they're no longer wed, she will get half of the household. In many other African countries, if there's a divorce or whatever, the man gets everything, and then the woman has to fend for herself. So that's just one example. There are a lot of women in places of leadership as well, within the government and within the church as well. This is a blessing of some babies. This mother had twins, and in Rwanda, if you are found to have twins in your belly, it can be a death sentence. And so we were just so overjoyed that both babies were born safely and that the mother was very well. And we were just praising God for that blessing. For us here in the States, if we have a pregnancy, generally speaking, it's not something scary. But in other parts of the world, it can be. We attended prayer every week, and this is something that every week at the church, they begin probably around 8, 7 in the morning. They would tell us to arrive around 9 so that we wouldn't get too tired, I guess. But they start fasting from dinner the night before, and then they don't eat again until after prayer is over, which is usually around 3 or 4 in the afternoon the next day. That happens every week, and what prayer consists of is it's not just sitting around and fervently praying, which that is part of it, but there's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of singing, there's some teaching that happens, and I really look forward to this every week. You can see my wife, Christine, also attended fairly regularly. There were 4 congregations in existence when we arrived, the Gesiza Church, and this is what it was looking like when we got there. You can see there aren't any windows, there's no roof. The wall is made of good red brick, and they would meet within this structure. And the first day that we visited, it did rain, and people still were there. And you can see the children piled in at the doorways. Pictured there is Pastor Etienne in the gray suit, and in the blue suit is the pastor of the Gesiza Church, and this is his family. All of our pastors are bivocational. They are not paid by their churches. They have to have another vocation. One of the things you noticed when I said the income is about $500, jobs are not plentiful. It's very hard to find work in Rwanda, and so denominations that pay their pastors find that people just say, oh, I'm called to be a pastor, because they're looking for a job. And so Etienne decided from the beginning, like, our pastors will be called to be pastors, and they'll prove that by also being able to support themselves. So Pastor Habimana here is a carpenter by trade, and he's also the pastor of the Gesiza Church. The Mudende Church was just a frame looking like this. And the pastor of that church, we visited this church, and that umbrella is not for rain. That umbrella is because they're afraid that we will get burnt. And so they're holding an umbrella over my daughter so she won't get sunburned. It was really nice of them to think of us in that regard. Pastor Samson is a mechanic. He's an auto mechanic by trade. And this is his family too. He actually, at this time, was driving 40 minutes one way to get to his church, which is not the same as me driving 40 minutes to get here. The road from his house to the church is very different, mountains and lots of bumps, and it also costs an awful lot of money for gasoline. So he was making quite a sacrifice to pastor this church. The Humore Church, this is the oldest of our congregations. It's the oldest building. This building would not pass the government inspection that is making it hard for us to build the other ones. I'll talk about that in a second. But because it was built before those regulations were in place, they are approving it, and it gets grandfathered in. This building was more or less paid for by the Buffalo Valley Church of the Brethren several years ago. And this one's the furthest away, and had an influx of membership as we met a different Batwa community while we were there. They started attending the church. And this is what the church looks like on the inside. And this was the pastor at that time. He's now helping with the previous church that I was talking about. He's one of the students that we sent to theological training. His name's Emmanuel, and that's his family. The Gisenyi Church is what's going to be the headquarters of the Church of the Brethren in Rwanda. It's called the City Church. It's like maybe 2 minutes from a downtown city. It is, as you can see, kind of out in a village location. The building, see if I'm pressing the right thing. This right here is what they're calling the temporary church. This is where it's made of mud brick, which does not meet the government regulation. So if the government were to come and they said, yep, this is our church, we're done building, the government would close it down immediately. The mud brick, I guess, doesn't have the staying power for when rains come and things of that nature. So they're calling that the temporary building right now. That's where they are meeting to worship. Eventually, once building is completed there, you can see the foundation of the new building here. And they also purchased land back here while we were there. Once that building is completed, the temporary facility will house a nursery school as well as the Christian education stuff like Sunday school on Sundays. And this is what the church looks like on the inside. Their choirs are just incredible. I can't get over how fun it is to worship there. And this is Pastor Etienne and his wife. So Pastor Etienne's the one that I was saying has planted all of the churches. He's the Earlham College grad. Okay, can we play that? So this is what worship's like. I just wanted you to kind of get a sense for it. And you'll see my kids in the middle of it. And what they're saying there is, yes, yes, Calvary. Yes, yes, Calvary. Yes, Calvary. They're celebrating what Jesus has done for us. There's a thing that they do when they're singing certain choruses. They'll sing it to each direction. So they're singing it to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. It's just a lot of fun. That's what I was talking about when I said worship here is a little different. Okay, we can move on. Thank you. The kids are having a blast. You can see my kids in the middle there too. All right, great. So again, all these things were already here before we went. The 4 congregations, which you've seen, the prayer meetings every single week. There's a prison ministry that was very active. If you go to prison in Rwanda, you don't get fed. There's no laundry. So they literally rely on their family and churches to come and bring them food, come and bring them clean clothing, things of that nature. So that's a need that Pastor Etienne has been meeting since the beginning. Training of leaders, both in university and theological training. The women's program is very active, as well as working with the Batwa, which I've referred to already. The choirs, just beautiful. And they have a national youth cabinet that meets pretty regularly as well. They told us from the beginning, the biggest need, what we need is, it's a physical need. We need to complete our buildings so that the government doesn't close our churches down. Basically, the government had passed a bunch of regulations saying that churches had to meet these different specifications. They had to have a certain number of pit latrines. They had to have 3, one for men, one for women, and one for children. They had to have running water so that you could adequately wash your hands. They had to be built with the good red brick that I mentioned earlier. They have to be a certain size, all these different things. They have to have parking spaces, which is silly because nobody has cars really. Just different regulations. And they were saying if we don't get these buildings to where they need to be, the government can close us down. And so we decided to tell this story back home. Something that you'll see in this video is they came together to raise money themselves. They did not say, Pastor Josiah, go get money from America. They got together and they set a goal. They wanted to raise around $2,000, which again, that's 4 people's whole year salary, right? And they exceeded their goal. They raised $2,500. And so we decided to tell that story back here and just to ask churches if they'd be willing to contribute towards that. This was several years back. Before we play this clip, I want to tell you that they did this same fundraising again this year, and as they're trying to build the building in Gisenyi, the headquarters in Gisenyi. And this year they raised $6,000 just themselves. So there will be another video coming around that I'm hopefully going to send to you guys as well. And if you guys would feel led to help in them building their churches, that would be a wonderful blessing for them. But this is the video that we sent, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and I'll tell you what happened after that. And it really was amazing to see what happened when we sent that video around, to see how the churches here responded. The brethren in the U.S. Held special offerings. Some churches saw the video and were like, oh, we'll match it, no problem. And some others pledged to continue to support the work in prayer, which is very important too. And we were able to raise around $25,000 just by sending that around. And so I told you that this is what the church was looking like when we arrived. And we were there about one school year, so about 9 months. And when we left, the church in Gesiza looked like that. And that picture, they framed that picture and sent it home with us. And that's the members there. And I told you that Mudende Church looked like that when we arrived, and when we left, it looked like that. And they were able, I told you they were able to buy some land around Gisenyi, and they're now beginning the construction based on some other giving and some other fundraising that they've done themselves on the Gisenyi church. I don't have pictures of that at this point, but they were able to buy that land behind the back here. They were able to buy that, and so the foundation is already laid. And I saw some pictures, and they already have walls. I think the work camp that goes in early June is going to take part in some of the painting of the new building in Gisenyi as well. So there was more that happened other than just buildings. Buildings are important, as we saw, that we don't want the church to be closed down. But the church itself matured. We were able to hold brethren baptism down at the lake. This is the Great Lakes region of Africa, and so you've heard of Lake Victoria probably. This is Lake Kivu, which isn't quite as big as Lake Victoria, but it's still on the order of like Lake Erie. It's a very big lake right in the middle of Africa, and the climate's very tropical. But anyway, every year on Christmas Day and on Easter Sunday, all of the churches of the city at different time slots and at different parts of the lakeshore hold baptisms out at the lakeshore. Most of them doing it once backwards, because that was the custom of the churches that taught them. We've been able to go and talk to them some about what it means, why we do it the way that we do it. This was really important as Pastor Etienne did a brethren baptism one time before we arrived, and the people there were like, what is this? You're doing it 3 times, and you're doing it forward. Oh, this must be evil because it's new, right? And so we ended up being able to talk to them like, nah, it's new to you, but it's like, there's several hundred years of doing it this way, and here's why we do it, and to have that kind of teaching. The young man there with my kids is actually an EYN student of Manchester College who was visiting us in Rwanda the day that we did baptisms. And our own Rachel was baptized in Rwanda as well on Easter Sunday. On Easter, we did baptism along a river instead of the lake because the lake was closed. I'll tell that story some other time. But essentially, people had walked almost a day's journey to get there, and all of a sudden, we couldn't do it because the lake was closed. And so we found another body of water and did it anyway. You can see it was pretty muddy. It was the water was rushing pretty good. I did insist that time to not be the only one. They really wanted the white guy to be the one baptizing people, and I'm like, no, like you guys have the training, you guys are pastors, you have master's degrees, like why am I the only one? And so anyway, I insisted the second time to not be the only one. And there's Rachel next to the pastor from Gesiza's daughter got baptized the same day as Rachel. There's a book that Galen Hackman wrote for the EYN church on brethren beliefs and practices. And just prior to us going to Rwanda, that book was translated into Kinyarwanda. And it was such a blessing for us to be able to bring that teaching along with us to Rwanda. So what they wanted me to do was to travel around to all the churches and teach it, right? And I was like, that's not going to be helpful because I'm only here for a year. Like, what happens after, right? And so what we did instead was I had each of the churches select 2 or 3 leaders, and we did sort of a cohort, and we met, did a chapter every week and that kind of thing. They could ask whatever questions they had, and then they went to their churches. They taught their own people, because also like the kind of illustrations I would use, like, wouldn't make any sense, right? They know their people so much better than I do, and so that was a big part of it. And so we were able to teach about the Trine Immersion Baptism, for instance. We were able to teach about living simply. In Rwanda, a lot of the pastors will take all the money from the church and buy themselves really nice suits and have very nice cars and stuff like that. And people would always wonder when they come to our church, why does Pastor Etienne, like, his suit's fine, but why doesn't he have like one of like that pastor over there? And we're like, well, because our teaching is that he should live simply, right? And he should be a servant just like everybody else. And so we were able to do a lot of that teaching. We also did some teaching around Love Feast. And I cannot tell you how powerful it was to participate in the first Love Feast in a country. And they really loved the foot washing. It was an interesting thing culturally that there are certain diseases that we don't know about here that travel through the feet in Rwanda. Different, what would you call it? Parasites and bugs and worms that can crawl in through your feet. And so at first they weren't sure, do I want to touch people's feet? I don't want to get the parasites and stuff like that. And so what we decided to do is to use the same medicine that you would use to treat that condition, right? Put that same medicine in the water, and so even while we were cleansing one another spiritually, we were also doing a physical act of service for one another, and it really was beautiful to see how they took to it. And some of the deacons were taking the basins around and washing everybody's feet because they're like, we didn't make people come to wash their feet, but some of the deacons took the water to the people that hadn't come around. The simple meal that we shared, they decided it cannot be. It cannot be simple. We have to eat all of the good things that we can eat. If our people are coming from miles around, we have to feed them well. And so there was meat, there was beans, there was rice, there was plantains. They brought out big platters and set it in the middle of the children, and the children are all gathered around as well. At the first Love Feast in Gisenyi, there were, I think I counted 150 children that came. I think there were probably, if you count the children, around 400 people that came to that. And that was 2 congregations meeting together to have the Love Feast. I talked to them about how the bread and the cup are symbols, and it doesn't matter what kind of bread we use, you know. You should use your traditional chapati, the flat bread. That would be a great thing that we could use. And so they decided to use that. I said, you should use your traditional sorghum drink that you guys have in the village. Sorghum drink doesn't look red. It doesn't look like blood. And so they decided they wanted something bright red. So you can see in the table, they used like a red Kool-Aid for their for their cup. And this is the breaking of the bread as well. Our family matured so much during our time there as well. We learned about hope. These people have so much less than we have in this country, and instead of like getting caught up in worry, instead of getting caught up in, oh, what will we do? They will say, well, maybe tomorrow will be better. With God's help, tomorrow will be better. And they truly believe, faith is so real when you don't have the power to make the thing different yourself, right? They believe. They believe and they have hope. Even amidst that atrocious history that I talked about, they have hope. These are a couple scriptures that spoke to me around that idea of hope, that we're so easy to get worried and so easy to lose hope, and yet these people embody hope every single day. Relationships matter so much, you guys. Relationships over tasks. We're always all about, oh, I got this done, I got that done, I got that done, and we don't hang out together sometimes. And as I said earlier, a lot of being there was just being with people, just being with them. Even if we can't communicate well, sharing space is a beautiful thing. What we're doing today, sharing space together, is beautiful. Even if nothing gets done, it's okay. We're together, and there's something beautiful that happens when we're together. This picture was taken, we walked several miles from the main road to go to a church member's house, and he said that it was the first time that anybody from the church had been to his house. And so he invited his whole village to come, and that's all the people. I didn't know half of those people. But we took so long getting there, we literally spent like the day just hanging out, and we had some devotions, and you always had to be ready to teach as well. As the missionary, they're always asking for some sort of Bible teaching as well. Recognizing our own weakness and how God's power is made perfect in our own weakness. This is something that we here in America really need to learn. To just really rely on God. What he's going to do is so much greater than what we could do ourselves. And we really had to let go of a lot during this year and just recognize that God's got it and that he'll take care of it and that what he's going to do is better than what we're going to do. My kids learned how to be generous. Often, the neighborhood kids would come and, oh, the crayon, I want crayon. Okay, here. Just being willing to share things, being willing to share our lives, being willing to share our time with people, and just how much richer our lives are when we live our lives with open hands instead of clenched fists. Just recognizing that what we have is for everyone. What we have, it doesn't belong to us anyway. Everything that we have comes from God. And then learning how to form relationships even when language doesn't work. This young man that Asher is friends with doesn't speak English at all. He's a member of a family who is Italian, so they speak fluent Italian and fluent French. And somehow Asher, who doesn't speak either of those things, and this boy who doesn't speak English, made it work and became good friends. It's been pretty hard now that they can't share the same space to keep the friendship alive, because communication's virtually impossible. But during our year, they were able to forge a friendship. We had to learn how to overcome fear, and these pictures each illustrate certain fears. You see the hippo there. Asher learned before we went that the hippo is the most dangerous animal in the world. There's more fatalities. Outside of mosquito bites and malaria and stuff, there's more fatalities on hippo attacks than just about any animal in the world. And so, thankfully, the lake we lived on did not have hippos, and I can talk about that in a second. But he was afraid that the hippos were going to get him, so he had to overcome his fear. The bottom right there is disease. My wife's in the medical field, and she was very fearful that Ebola or any of the other diseases that are not prevalent here, that we'd have to deal with that. And praise God, we didn't. The middle picture illustrates my daughter's fear, which was how am I going to make friends? And we were able to. We made fast friends. It was a beautiful thing. And then my fear was that the volcano. You might have read in the news the volcano actually erupted this year. That picture is outside of our back door. The volcano it's a while, it's miles away. But the volcano did erupt, and there was the Church of the Brethren actually sent a whole bunch of money to help rebuild homes and to help feed people who were dealing with the aftermath of the eruption, as well as all the earthquake activity that was happening. Another part of my fear was that the lake is on a bed of methane gas. There's a lake in another part of Africa that it burped several years ago, which really means it exploded. The big lake exploded, and everything miles around basically was dead. And so that was my big fear: was will the volcano erupt, and also will the lake explode? We were able to overcome all of these fears. Asher got into a boat next to some hippos swimming in the safari. Christine and myself hiked to the top of that volcano, and we actually stayed in like a little hut, maybe like a quarter mile from the lake of fire. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done. Rachel was able to, make friends, and we were overcoming a lot as far as disease and things like that. We had to learn how to die to ourselves, how to just trust God, right? That picture on the left is our car, which they kept saying, oh, just fix it. Oh, just fix it. We're paying a bunch of money to fix it. Finally, we were at the point where we're like, if it doesn't work this time, we're not fixing it anymore. And as they were fixing it, it caught on fire. And so, that was that. But we just basically like continually are just like, okay, like what's the word? Okay, fine. Okay. It's just one of those things like letting go of control. My wife really had to let go of her identity in a lot of ways. In our household, as I shared, she's a leader. She's in the medical field. People in our neighborhood will ask her all the time about medical stuff. In our church, she's a leader as well. And in Rwanda, we would have meetings and stuff, and she would speak up. And then somebody would say, oh, but what does the pastor think? Things like that. And so it was my job to then be like, well, what she said is what I think, but also she was unable to, she's a physician assistant, and that's not a thing in Rwanda. And so they had no idea that really is basically kind of like a doctor. And so she went and tried to help at the hospital, and they basically put her in the corner, and she signed some papers here and there. So she really had to let go of the things that are important to her identity here in America. And the kids had to give up their school. We taught them in our own home. Their parents were their teachers, and they hated it. We were all very happy to come back as far as the schooling situation. And then, of course, 6 months after we got back, they were back home again because of COVID. So anyway, these are different sacrifices that we learned to make while we were there. I think that's towards the end of what I had. Brethren Global Mission and Service is the office that sent us, and we thank them so much for making that possible. Pastor Bob is a part of a group called Brethren World Mission. I'm sure you know some about that, but ask him about it. It's wonderful. They were such a support to us. If they're having a meeting and say, hey, we need about $1,000 for this project or that project, almost always they're saying yes. And so those are some of the organizations. And of course, my home church for letting us go for about a year. Are there any questions? I know we only have a couple minutes. Any questions about anything that I've shared or anything I didn't share? Yes, sir.
You mentioned during the baptism that the other churches in the village or in the city came to the lake also.
Mm-hmm.
What other denominations are there?
Oh, so many. Just about anything that you can think of. Rwanda is a Christian nation. I think it's over 90% of the population is Christian. Some of the first missionaries to come were Anglican. So the Anglican church is very big, the Catholic church is very big, but the historic peace churches are bigger and bigger. There is also Seventh-day Adventist, there's what we would call Pentecostal fellowships, there's some non-denominational kinds of groups as well. The United Methodists are there. I said the Mennonites, lots and lots, yeah. Something that I really love about that is that all these denominations don't just stay apart. They get together all the time to praise God together. If we're going to do something like we need to build a water tank for my church, I'll invite all the other churches to bring their choirs, and everybody gets together and gives a little bit of offering and praises God together, and we're able to raise money for whatever we're doing. And everybody goes to everybody else's stuff. Something that's also interesting is they also often will invite the imams or the Muslim believers to their events as well.
What can we do as a church maybe to support the work?
Sure. So the big thing is pray, is be in prayer for the churches there, as far as just any discord that could possibly happen as a young denomination. But right now, they are in the process. Once they finish building the headquarters, the Gasenyi Church and the headquarters, they will have all that's necessary to get the document and be an official denomination recognized by their government. So, sorry, I hit the microphone. So the big thing would be to really possibly support financially that work of building that church. Right now, they are in the process of building it. The total cost, I think, to complete the whole project is around $30,000 US. And so even like any little piece of that would really help an awful lot. The work camp is coming in the beginning of June. I think all of the materials about that are coming out pretty soon. I'm going to be going along with somebody from the work camp office, and that is for 18 and older. I think they term it a young adult trip, but you do not have to be, under 35 or whatever to come. So please think about it. It would be awesome to be able to show you Rwanda together, and we could experience that wonderful country together as well. Yeah, Marietta. Okay, so that is something I didn't get into that much, is that even though they don't use the terms anymore, it's not that we don't think about the genocide anymore. They have a whole month of remembrance every year, and in particular 1 week that you're expected to not do anything that you normally would do. You're expected to show up at different community events to rehearse what happened. We don't want to forget so we can make sure that it never happens again. Within the same households, within the same families, there are Hutu and Tutsi today. I think they can probably tell, just kind of from looking at each other, who is what. I had a really hard time. The only people group I was able to see just by looking at them is the Batwa, because they're typically a little bit shorter, and the kind of structure of their heads are pretty pronounced. It's pretty easy to pick them out. They're what we would call a pygmy people. So they're quite it's striking the difference between a Batwa and a Hutu or a Tutsi. Yeah.
I think we'll need to stop.
Sure.
Because we've got our congregational meeting coming up.
Pastor Bob has my email, so if you do have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'm happy to answer.
So about 5 minutes, and we'll convene our congregational meeting here. So you can just stay or take a break. Yes,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Josiah.